Right, so I unboxed all 4 new iPhone 15s last week, and I've been using them and testing them ever since. Not only comparing them to last year's iPhones, but also to the very best from Android, to hopefully help you decide whether to, number 1, switch from an old iPhone 14 Pro Max, don't ask about the cracks, and number 2, whether you might consider jumping across the border from your favourite Android phone. Because according to various articles, even though total smartphone sales have been in decline, over the last 5 years, people globally are switching more than ever. But why is this? And crucially, is the iPhone 15 Pro Max the final nail in the flagship phone coffin, taking more Android phone users away with it? Well, let's start with battery, as I think it's an important one. Because I feel that Apple kind of dropped the ball a little bit last year with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and not because necessarily it was a terrible battery performer, but just quite simply because of how good the iPhone 13 Pro Max had been previously. I felt this last year I've been reaching for my charger slightly quicker and earlier in the day than I possibly would like, and certainly felt with the 13 Pro Max. And on top of that, I've noticed, and as of a lot of you, that the battery health has diminished quite quickly. I think quite simply for battery, there have been better options on the Android side this year. And as I said, if you were on the iPhone 13 Pro Max, upgrading for battery alone was probably pretty pointless. But this 15 Pro Max battery upgrade does seem to be, so far, quite significant. I'm easily getting through a full working day where I'm obviously on my phone quite a lot without the need to charge. And as an example, here's a screenshot of a day when I took the phone off charge at just before 6 a.m. Yes, I have young children, so therefore, naturally, lions don't exist anymore. And I'm still at just under 70% capacity, gone midday. So over 6 hours off charge and only 30% gone. So we're looking at around 30 to 40% left after a 12-hour period, which is a real breath of fresh air coming from the 14 Pro Max. And I think a lot of Android flagships this calendar year are going to struggle to compete if, and this is a big if, the battery health doesn't drop significantly like last year's. So the jury's out. In terms of charging, we have seen another upgrade here by Apple, as of course all new iPhones finally ship with Type-C charging for faster file sharing and charging speeds, in theory, because it seems Apple have still actually limited the charging power to around 25 watts, which is a far cry from some Android counterparts, and of course Android have had the Type-C technology for a number of years now. Most flagship Android phones will therefore still charge faster than the iPhone 15 Pro Max, but even though I'm not praising Apple here because I do feel it should have come a lot sooner, MacBook, iPad, iPhone, new Type-C charging AirPods Pros, one cable. And this is going to be a big deal for Apple users. Some believe that Apple may have limited that charging power to 25 watts to reduce heat output. And while we're on that, I have seen a few complaints to suggest that the iPhone 15s, especially the Pro models, and in particular the Pro Max, is suffering from heat issues, warm or hot to the touch. Now, while I have noticed it to be slightly warmer than last year's model, I can't say it's been drastic in this department, but there may be slight variance in those 3nm TSMC made A17 Pro chips powering the new phones. And of course, if your iPhone is heating up, then naturally the inbuilt safety thermal throttling is going to kick in faster and sometimes harder than you would probably expect. So performance might actually dip based on that, resulting in less than ideal conditions for a phone that has been deemed to have 10% faster CPU and 20% faster GPU than the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Similar to something you might remember on the 2019 MacBook Pros, I think the i9s, and I'm not sure if this is something that can be altered through a software update, or whether they're just going to have to go back to basics on a future model and improve the cooling system, similar to what we've seen on the Android side, especially those high-end gaming phones that have individual designated cooling systems. I don't know, but one to keep your eye on. That said, the new GPU design does mean the iPhone 15 Pro Max is excellent for gaming. Now, admittedly, even though I do partake in a little bit of mobile gaming, I wouldn't say I was an avid, hardcore gamer. But the simple fact that the A17 Pro chips allow for hardware-based ray tracing is a pretty huge thing, because it basically means gaming graphics look far more realistic because the rendering techniques used can much more accurately simulate the physical behavior of light within a scene, with reflections, shadows, and indirect lighting making objects and surfaces appear far more realistic, and up to now this has only been achievable on high-end gaming PCs and the like. Even the incredibly powerful new MacBook Pros can't even do this, which is a mind-blowing achievement for the iPhone. All in layman's terms, it simply means game developers could, and in some cases have, bring a lot of their console-grade gaming titles to the new iPhone. This 3nm process is a pretty huge deal.
Now, also new is the titanium build, and it's definitely lighter than last year, and because of the now slightly rounded edges on the frame, it's also much more comfortable to hold. It feels smaller and narrower.
The bezels look smaller, the footprint feels smaller, even if it's only marginal. Every millimetre counts, right? I have consistently made it abundantly clear that since the redesign for the 12 series, that the larger iPhones with the razor-sharp edges, while looking super premium, were not that comfortable to hold. The 15 Pro Max seems to be the perfect combination of aesthetically clean, sharp lines, but also that comfortable hold feel. And many were also worried prior to launch about the titanium looking dirty after holding, but I wouldn't say it necessarily feels or looks any worse than the stainless steel on the 14 Pro Max. I think if you've got grubby fingerprints, they're both going to show not that great. I still actually think the stainless steel looks worse, if I'm being honest, looking at that. And the new action button on the side, I think, is a welcome change. More customization options can only ever really be a good thing, right? Now, titanium is also known for its strength, corrosion resistance, and durability. So in theory, it should be incredibly hard to damage. But never work with children and animals. Thank you. Give me another 10-15 minutes. Kids, who'd have them, right? There have been reports of the iPhone 15 Pro Max not performing so great in durability tests, with the rear glass cracking under strain, possibly a result of that new glass and titanium combination. But having said that, I still think you should be fine as long as you don't plan to try and snap your phone in two. Plus, most of you will apply a strong case anyway. And that brings us nicely onto today's video sponsor, Casetify. Because especially for the iPhone 15 Pro Max and of course other iPhone models, they have just created a 10x military grade standard ultra bounce case, which is the strongest they've ever created and apparently has a drop protection of up to 32.8 feet, which is the equivalent of 3 basketball hoops high or 1 times T-Rex. Although I haven't ever measured a T-Rex, so I'll have to take their word for it.
Right, so let's put this to the test. Now, personally, I don't have anywhere near me that is exactly 32.8 feet high, but what I will do is conduct a 3-stage drop test from 3 realistic fall heights, starting with firstly, sort of car level, so getting out of the car, the phone might be on your lap, it might fall, etc. Then I'm going to do one which is pocket height, so waist height, and then I'm going to finish with one that is a ladder high. So I'm going to stand on a ladder and drop it from there. If you're doing a bit of DIY, you might be stood on a ladder, you know the drill. But before we do the drop test, this specific Ultra Bounce case uses a 6-layer rugged protection design that also includes this little camera lens cover as well, which I think is great because no one wants a cracked camera lens, right? The case also contains a hard shell backplate, an X-shaped EcoShock lining, Ultra Bounce corners, a hard shell bumper, and an EcoShock inner lining. Oh, and it's also got a screen protector on from Casetify as well. So let's do the first test, starting from car height-ish. Right, you ready? 3, 2, 1, dropped. New iPhone 15 Pro Max. Dropped on the floor. It did land on the edges and then flipped onto the front. As you can see, no problems whatsoever with that display and no problem on the case. A slight dustiness to the, don't know whether you can see that there. There we go, slight dustiness going on there, but no problems whatsoever. Right, now we're going to go from waist height. We're going to go from as if I've got it out of my pocket, like so, and it's dropped. That's twice, giving me the right woofters. Right, here we go. Woofters, what is that? Right, back case, fine. Screen, fine. Edges, again, just nothing, absolutely nothing. Bit dusty, wipe it off, good to go. But we've got the third and final test now, which is going to be from ladder height. Gonna go and get the ladder. Wait there. Here we go, people. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty scared. Right, so we're up the ladder, also in the middle of a road, so don't try this at home. I've got people down the other ends, making sure there's no cars coming. Oi, nearly fell. Scary times. Right, you ready? Up the ladder, taking out my pocket, gone to use it, and 1, 2, 3. Ah! Oh, my word. That's an expensive bit of kit to be breaking. But thankfully, look at that. Absolutely fine. Again, back panel, no problems whatsoever. And not even, there's a tiny little mark there now on that corner, but it's minuscule. It is absolutely minuscule. And now we finish the test. As you can see, when we take the case off, there is no problems to the back panel or frame either. Cracking job here, Casetify. That is an incredible case for protection.
Now, as well as protection, Casetify also pride themselves on sustainability, with this and many other cases being made from older recycled cases, and the style is also another core pillar, with tons of unique and customizable designs and colours, like this teardown one and this personalised ASBYT one. Love that. Furthermore, there are also different types of cases too, from impact, ultra impact and bounce, if you wanted something perhaps slightly thinner and more subtle, but still with good protection. All cases come shipped in some seriously premium looking retail packaging as well. Like, the presentation for the unboxing is actually better than some actual phone packaging, which is crazy. Get 15% off any order using the link in the video description below. Go and check it out if you want.
But back to the case at hand. Pun intended. Another new hype feature about the 15 Pro Max is, of course, the camera, or at least elements to the camera, because some aspects about it mean that it is quite an upgrade from previous models, or indeed from Android, but also there are elements to it that possibly might be a little bit underwhelming and making it feel a little bit stagnant.
In terms of the camera hardware, largely the bulk of the system is the same as the 14 Pro Max. There has been a substantial change in terms of zoom, more on that in a second, but we again have a 48 megapixel main sensor and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. So the tweaks here appear much more from an image processing point of view, with Apple promising now better low light performance, greater details, and more realistic skin tones. Now, personally, I feel portraits of people, they are nearly always really nice and sharp, even when the subject is moving. The focus and shutter speed do seem to be working better, leading to less blurry family photos and the like. Unfortunately, however, edge detection on non-human objects, as with previous iPhone models, still seems to be not that great compared to a lot of Android devices, Samsung, Pixel lines, etc. So if you're looking to use your phone for product photography, you might actually be better going down one of those routes than the new iPhone, possibly. And I also haven't noticed a huge change overall from the 14 Pro Max in a lot of photos. I still find, while improved, the colours, especially in portraits, to be slightly on the oversaturated side, with sometimes overly warm and orangey, reddy hues and skin tones. I probably will still go down the route of changing it from the default profile setting to the cooler temperature profile setting. I appreciate a lot of that is hugely subjective, but it is something that I have noticed, and it'd be interesting to hear from you guys whether you agree with this idea or not. I've noticed at times slightly more natural images on the 15 Pro Max over the 14 Pro Max, and I've also noticed the 14 to over sharpened, but they are very similar. The ultra wide again isn't night and day, but I did notice a difference, especially in low light, with more details and better dynamic range. Daytime shots though are largely the same between the two. And outside of the new zoom, I'm not sure there's much here to warrant that upgrade. Because again, even the selfie camera is basically identical.
But what about zoom and video?
Well, for zoom, this is the much awaited jump to a 5x optical zoom, much more now in keeping with the Android side. It's still not the 10x that Samsung offer on the S23 Ultra, for example, and in testing, the Samsung handset does appear to still offer more impressive, sharper distance images. But Apple have also added a similar little location window that shows you where you are within the scene, which is really helpful when zooming in, and for most people, 5x is a really solid distance to be able to punch into most things and get a really nice, crisp image. And on top of that, it makes distance video even more impressive than it already is. Using it at the Liverpool versus West Ham game at the weekend, invited to by Google, I noticed that following the action accurately was super easy, and then you have the brilliant action mode on top, which enables you to literally just point and shoot and not even have to worry in the slightest about shaking hands and walking movements, because the phone will do all of the hard graft, and the end product is actually quite breathtaking. And of course, you have further total zoom in both photo and video over the 14 Pro Max at 25 and 15x respectively. The main difficulty I see with the iPhone 15 Pro Max's zoom is the fact that now we have the 5x zoom lens, we don't have the 3x optical like we do on the 14 Pro Max. So really, that sort of range potentially probably will be better on the 14 Pro Max, with the 15 Pro Max only really coming into its own when it jumps 5x onwards.
And my final thoughts on whether I think the upgrade from the last iPhone or an Android phone is really worth it.
Well, outside of what we've discussed, a lot of the features of the new 15 Pro Max are very similar to the 14 Pro Max. iOS 17 has seen some cool new upgrades like Name Drop, where you can tap two iPhones together to share photos and numbers, a standby mode where you can place your phone on a wireless charger in landscape, and it gives you some helpful bedside or office table functionality like clock, etc. And the widgets are now much more interactive, so you don't have to actually go into your apps as much. It's more of a one press solution, something that has been implemented more on the Android side with companies like Nothing. But iOS 17 is also going to be available on a lot of other generations of iPhones. The gift and the curse of Apple's continued software updates to older devices. Gift and a curse in terms of their sales. The 120Hz Samsung made OLED display is brilliant, but basically the same. The stereo speakers, likewise. So for me, the upgrade recommendation can only be an individual thing. Type-C integration might streamline your life, and maybe a reason to upgrade alone. A better distance zoom might be just the ticket for you. The smooth feel in the hand and the action button, better battery, future-proofing console-worthy mobile gaming. These are all things that make for a substantially better phone than last year, but you might not care for any of those upgrades. And sticking with the 14 Pro Max might be the play. Personally, I think when you dig beneath the surface, it's just an incremental upgrade opinion doesn't really ring true, and I'd have to say it's probably the most perfect iPhone that Apple have made from any time. But it's the perfect iPhone. And have they done enough to convince Android users to switch? I'm not so sure.
Like, don't get it twisted, this is a truly elite smartphone. And in my opinion, the Apple ecosystem is probably still the best. So if you use a MacBook, an iPad, AirPods Pro, you use iMessage and FaceTime, etc., then getting an iPhone is still a bit of a no-brainer. But the chances are, if you currently use an Android phone, you probably don't use too many other Apple products. Just a hunch.
On top of that, I feel some Android phones, the likes of the S23 Ultra, the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, the upcoming Google Pixel 8 Pro, have and will have equally, if not better, all-round cameras for what I use them for, and I still wish that Apple allowed you to stack your apps from the bottom up. A request that seems so obviously basic and user-intuitive, especially on larger phones, that the decline not to do so seems almost as stubborn as the refusal to leave the Lightning port behind until its final death this year. Downloading additional apps from non-official app stores and the general customization opportunities to make your phone fit you better has pretty much always and will continue to be better on Android. And the fact you have hundreds of different designs and form factors to choose from only makes Android all that more appealing. So do I think people may make the move from Android to the latest iPhone 15 Pro Max from a flagship level? Yes. And I also think the market share will continue to shift towards Apple, especially with the fact that most modern flagship Android phones are equal, if not more expensive now than the top iPhones, and iPhones tend to maintain a higher resale value as well. I feel Apple are squeezing the market to the point where, unless Google do something fairly technologically drastic in terms of Android, or some of the brands that are using Android do something similar from a hardware point of view, which they're all certainly capable of, then there may be a time in the near future that even the most die-hard Android fans may make that switch. But I don't think the iPhone 15 Pro Max is the final nail in the coffin for Android just yet. Superb phone though. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Is the iPhone 15 Pro Max the final nail in the Android coffin? Is it the go-to smartphone for 2023? Is Android better? As an Apple user, do you think it's worth the upgrade from the 14 Pro Max? I'd love to hear, as always, your thoughts. Make sure, like I said, you check out the Casetify link in the video description below if you want a new iPhone case. If you did find this video helpful, it would be hugely appreciated if you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I've got tons more iPhone, Apple, and tech in general, content coming very, very soon. And follow me on my other social medias, ASBYT Official on Twitter, TikTok and Instagram for short form content, and just generally keeping in touch, chat. It's not actually Twitter anymore, is it? X, yo. That's poor. I think I'm going to leave it on that. I love you and leave you. My name's Adam. You've been the best as always. It's ASBYT. Peace out.